967770110.2b. Structural accumulation confirmed. Forget the index, the real signal is a massive smart money rotation into a specific upstream energy node.
110.2b, we're leaving that number right there. Don't ignore it. It represents a massive pivot in institutional flow that the broader market is entirely missing today.
Ignore the obvious retail headline of a 0.75% close on the KOSPI. The real story isn't there. We're looking at a complete decoupling. The main index was heavily influenced by short-term noise and retail excitement, but the smart money, they were busy operating right under the surface. They weren't buying the broad market. In fact, foreign investors dumped over 600 billion won in spot equity. Instead, they executed a massive rotation into upstream energy alpha nodes. For a global trader, this means the index is a total distraction. The flow of capital is the truth.
Analyze this divergence. Semiconductor players Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix are displaying pure event-driven volatility trading. We're talking massive net buys followed immediately by heavy liquidation. But SK Innovation and Samsung SDI, they're illustrating multi-week directional accumulation. This is structural pre-positioning. The smartest capital is treating semiconductors as a short-term trading vehicle, but they're treating these strategic tech partners in the energy sector as a fundamental long-term hold.
Which brings us back to that shock number, 110.2b. Foreign net buys in SK Innovation, a critical supply chain node, are accelerating. 16.4 billion won on the 27th, 31.9 billion on the 28th, then an explosive surge to 110.2b on the 29th. The volume is accelerating rapidly across all free sessions. Samsung SDI showed the exact same reversal, expanding to a massive buy today. This is a deliberate, multi-day accumulation strategy by foreign institutional capital, building a two-sided hedge on energy price entrenchment.
So the absolutely crucial point here is the sequencing. The buying began on April 27th, but WTI crude didn't spike above the $104.44 threshold until April 29th. The smart money front-ran the headline. They triggered a signal activation before the oil price actually spiked. They modeled the escalating geopolitical risk premium, specifically the Strait of Hormuz blockade risks, and positioned themselves perfectly in this upstream alpha node. The buy preceded the price move. This wasn't a reaction. It was pure anticipation. Divergence detected. Seoul rallied, but tonight's U.S. Federal Reserve event poses a high-threat macro filter. We identify this as a potential bull trap. Execute Path E, the macro trap protocol. This localized Asian optimism, driven by temporary semiconductor inflows, is on a direct collision vector. It's heading straight for a massive macro wall in New York tonight. The Asian flow is fundamentally out of sync with the impending U.S. volatility. And this brings us to the dual-layer threat we're currently tracking. First, the Iran blockade risk isn't just an isolated energy story. It creates a direct transmission path to global inflation. Second, WTI sustaining above $100.44 is a structural threat to the broader economy. If Federal Reserve Chair Powell classifies this energy-driven inflation as a structural reacceleration at tonight's FOMC, that converts into a secondary transmission path. It will directly and aggressively reprice the discount rates for high-valuation U.S. growth equities. We have a logic gap, a massive contradiction in the data flow. The supply chain says bull, but the options, FX, and bonds say bear. And that conflict decides the open. We see structural accumulation in energy nodes, but simultaneously, Korean foreign exchange banks hit an average daily turnover of over $100 billion. They're hedging aggressively. The currency is weakening. Yields are rising. Something is going to break. Do not trade the headline. Trade the supply chain. Switch to execution protocol. Focus. Execute the battle plan. Watch the levels closely. Enter selective longs above 24,440. Confirm Powell remains dovish. Exit immediately below 24,440. Cancel all growth longs. Monitor the U.S. 10-year yield. Exit if it breaks 4.40%. Invalidate in the chop range. Watch the VIX. Hold cash as a position. Move fast. Wait for big tech earnings. Confirm AI infrastructure demand. Watch Meta and Microsoft. Validate the semiconductor premium. Cancel longs if guidance fails. Protect your capital. Track the target correlation vector. Note the correlation. Rho equals 0.82. Link foreign FX transactions to equity discount rates. Follow the dollar. Watch the yield curve. Let structural alignment guide you.
Initiate the final check. Execute phase 4. Watch pre-market volume on target nodes. Confirm structural alignment. Invalidate if contradictory. Stick to the metrics. Do not guess.
Log the result at 7:30 EDT, accept no exceptions. Assume smart money is in position. Are you? Subscribe for the edge. Be here.